Testing 1, 2, testing.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the executive on echoing.
Somebody's got something switched on.
Right. Are we okay now? Yes, that's a bit better. Thank you. No. Somebody's got a thing open somewhere. Sorry, we'll have to pause while we sort out this horrible echo. Is anybody on Teams? Not me. Oh, is that better? I think that's better. Yes, not echoing. Thank you. My name's Prue Bray. I am the Deputy Leader of the Council and the Executive Member for Children's Services, and I'll be chairing this meeting. Can any? No, that's come on again. It echoed again. Please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off. And if you are participating via Teams, when you're not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphones. And please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. So I'll start by introducing the members of the executive. So from my right, we've got Ian Shenton, Paul Fishwick, Lindsay Ferris, Imogen Shepherd-Bay, Rachel Bishop-Firth and Sarah Kerr. And then behind me, we have the officers who are supporting us. So I have to look, because I can't work out. And Andrew Moulton, Graham Ebers, Priya Patel and Lucian Barker. Okay, and in the corner we have, where nobody can see you, we have George from Alico and Matt Pope. Thank you. And I believe we have some officers on Teams as well. There are no members of the executive attending virtually. Everybody's in the room, and I have apologies from Councillor Stephen Conway, who's the leader of the council, David Hare and Clive Jones. And I don't think there can be any other apologies for absence. Okay, we will get going. As we have a long agenda, as you see by the thickness of the pieces of paper in front of me. Minutes of the previous, I'm starting to echo again. Echo.
It's coming from Lucian.
Sorry.
Circle flappings.
Yes.
I can't use because then I won't have YouTube.
Yes, it's definitely Lucian that's causing it. Sorry. Okay, let's continue, and we'll, as long as people can hear us, I suppose that's all that matters. So we're asked to confirm the minutes of the executive meeting on the 21st of March 2023 and the extraordinary executive meeting on the 20th of April 2023. Does anybody have anything they want to say about those minutes before we agree them? Imogen.
It's a very minor thing, but in question 102.3, the question to the executive member for environment from Chas Hockin about wheelie bins and terraced homes, the written answer says here when I think it should say there. Somebody's missing a T.
Right.
Sorry to be a pedant.
No, that's fine. Okay, we'll make that amendment unless anybody has any objections to it, and then we'll agree the minutes. Is everybody happy with the minutes apart from that? Yep. Okay, can we have a formal show of hands to show you accept them with that amendment? Thank you very much. And we'll sort that out after the meeting. Next item is declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest? No, there are none, thank you. Next item is statement from the leader. I have a very short statement to make. So I'm finding this echoing extremely disconcerting. No, it's still
The laptop in front of the room.
no, that's too difficult as well. It doesn't normally do this, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really sorry about it.
The microphone on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Turn it on again, try that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll just have a 2-minute pause while we try to sort this out. You've stopped.
That's what we're getting.
Is that better? No.
It's not ideal, but it should fix it.
Yeah, it's, she can't turn the laptop off because it stops the webcasting, but she can't.
It can't mute it.
Can't mute it.
Webcasting, so if
Yep.
it takes a laptop elsewhere, it should, sadly, fix the problem.
Sit in the other room.
Yep. Well, right.
Okay.
While they're sorting out the laptop, we should all sing or something for a minute.
Just go through and check that we're live.
Right, okay.
Bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut solution, unfortunately.
Yes.
No, I don't believe when we do that, but I don't know why they've got it.
We just have to make sure that we're actually webcasting. Yes.
That's what she's supposed to be doing.
Yes. Okay. So we can hear what's going on in the other room. I don't know whether they can hear us hearing them.
Matt's decided to go cooking. I don't know what's different. I think it's the laptop.
It's normally we wouldn't have this issue. Believe me, I agree. Right. No, I can't hear them now. No. Yes, so
That would be fun.
I think we must be making progress because we've stopped hearing strange noises. Here we are. Right. Yes, thank you. Right, we can resume, I think. Thank you, everybody. So, statement from the Deputy Leader this evening. I am very pleased to be able to announce to everybody that last Friday, the council won 2 Municipal Journal Achievement Awards, one for innovation in delivering sustainability and social value, and the other one for the best social housing initiative. And I'd like to congratulate all the officers who had anything to do with either project, and also the officers who, for 2 other awards, who were shortlisted but didn't win. We were the only council that won 2 awards, and I think we should justifiably be proud of what we've achieved. So thank you to everybody and congratulations. And the other announcement, oh goodness. No, sorry. No, it was all fine for a minute. Now it's gone again. Right, while it's quiet, I'll continue because I think I'm still being broadcast. And we have a question on the agenda from Gary Cowan. That item is on the agenda by mistake. That question was actually asked in March and it shouldn't be on the agenda for tonight. And Gary has been informed. He did get an answer on the night when it was asked. Okay, so that moves us on to public question time. So we have two public questions. We've got Chaz Hockin. Is he? Yes, please come forward and ask your question. Right.
Good evening, councillors. Can the council explain what has happened to all the money taken incorrectly by car parking machines on bank holidays? Will it be refunded to users who can easily be traced? And what plans do the council have to ensure that in future no payment is taken when charges is not required? I have amended it because it says bank holidays, but you are now charging on bank holidays. So it's in the times when you do not charge, say for example, after 10 o'clock.
Okay. Paul, would you like to answer?
Yes, thank you, Chaz, for your question. All our car park ticket machines are programmed not to charge on bank holidays where charges do not apply. Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you just let him answer? Yeah, you've got to, I'm afraid you'll get a chance to ask a supplementary question, but you have to let him answer the question first. I'm sorry, but you do. Paul, finish your answer.
So for any additional special bank holidays, such as the Golden Jubilee and the King's Coronation, the council installed notification signs at each car park ticket machine advising that during these special days, charges did not apply. Anyone who did pay on these days were advised no refunds would be offered. From the 3rd of July 2023, charges will be made on bank holidays and the machines will be programmed for applicable fees.
Right.
That's not answered the question. My question said, can the council explain what has happened to all the money taken on bank holidays? I'm talking back to year dot.
So I'll repeat what I said. All our car park ticket machines are programmed not to charge on bank holidays where charges do not apply.
The income has gone into the car parking income. That's the
So
answer.
you have taken money incorrectly and you've not tried to give it back to the people who paid incorrectly, because when you
I'm sorry that you've had your supplementary. I
No,
understand your
no.
frustration. Yes, you have. I understand your frustration, but that is the answer.
Right, well, I
I'm
would like
happy
to
to talk to you after the meeting if you want to continue the conversation.
Well, I've now got a supplementary question.
Well, you've had a supplementary question. I'm sorry, Mr. Hockin, but clearly the communication is not working here. I think it'd be better if we had a conversation after the meeting where we can explain to you without any restrictions on what you can ask and how we can answer.
So I've got to wait
So
till the
that
end
we
of
can
the
try-
meeting.
Well, either that or you can email us and yes.
I was going to suggest, Chaz, that you.
Yes.
I have emailed you and you failed to answer.
But okay,
I haven't received any email from you.
Please, can you
I
stop now? I'm sorry, but
wish to make an objection.
No, you can't. I'm really sorry, but you've had your chances to answer and you've received an answer. If you're not happy with it, we've offered to communicate with you further and we will do that. Okay, and second question is from Jim Fruin. Is he online? I can see him there. Jim, can you unmute and ask your question? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My question is, at the May full council meeting, leaders past and present strongly emphasised a compassionate council and a compassionate budget. Yet in the budget, Wokingham introduced fees for families who suffer the death of a baby, infant or a child, services that were previously free. Will the executive show some compassion for families in these circumstances and revert these services to being free of charge? Thank you.
Imogen, would you like to answer?
Hi, Jim. Thank you for your question. I understand your concern on this sensitive subject, but just to be clear, fees have not been introduced for families who suffer the death of a child. Funeral fees for children under 18 years of age are directly claimed by undertakers and paid from the central government Children's Funeral Fund. This is funding provided to cover the funeral costs in the event of the death of a child, so families do not have to pay. What was introduced by Wokingham Borough Council in May was a fee that is claimed from the Children's Funeral Fund to cover Wokingham Borough Council's costs. This could include the coroner services and registering the death. This is funding that has always been available for Wokingham Borough Council to claim, but we have not done so until now. However, be reassured that this will have no impact on families who find themselves in these terrible circumstances, and for them, the services are still free of charge.
Thank you, Jim. Jim, do you have a supplementary question?
I can, if that's allowable, thank you. The supplementary is, can we do something about how this is communicated? Because if you look at the fees and charges for death of infants, babies and children, it appears to the uninitiated that there is a fee to be paid. There is a very small footnote which refers to a comment further down a separate page, and it is not clear that that fee does not have to be paid. So can we please do that?
Jim?
I'm sure we can communicate that a bit better if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. I think that's the last of the public questions. We've now got member questions, and the first member question is Rebecca Margetts. Rebecca, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Prue. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, if you keep your head
Thank
facing forwards, if you look off to the
Sorry.
side, you fade out a bit.
All right,
So-
I'll try my best. I'll move.
Thank
that
you.
way. Residents are concerned about the proposal to build 2 SEND schools at Rook's Nest. The only bus service to this area is infrequent. There is no pavement or cycleway, so the only way to get there for staff and pupils will be to drive. The proposal is contrary to the council's own aims to reduce carbon emissions and promote active travel. What is the administration doing to address these concerns?
Okay, Rebecca, thank you. In recommending locating the 2 schools on the same site, a lot of consideration has been given to carbon emission reduction. During the construction stage, there are a lot of efficiencies the contractors can make, particularly in getting plant and materials onto one site instead of 2. Needing only one access road will lead to significant reductions in materials and minimise costs. And similarly, opportunities will be explored to share infrastructure, particularly parking, playing fields and utilities, similarly reducing the overall carbon footprint. We have secured a commitment from the DFE, Department for Education, that the schools will be net zero carbon in operation and be climate resilient. And we will be incorporating enhanced landscaping options and additional tree planting in the design. As with every school, a travel plan promoting sustainable travel will be required as part of planning, and we will be promoting walking and cycling to staff and pupils. Having the schools co-located will also provide the greatest opportunity to optimise home to school transport, taxi or minibus journeys. But these young people are some of the most vulnerable in our communities, and therefore it is unlikely that either public transport, cycling or walking to school would be a viable option for them. However, the very fact that the schools are in the borough will by itself reduce the distances travelled and thus reduce carbon emissions. Having said all that, I do want to make 2 other points. If you refer to the agenda, you will see that these schools will only take up a small part of Rook's Nest. And secondly, the Conservative group of which you're a member included Rook's Nest as a site for 270 houses in the local plan update, which I think would worry residents a lot more than the 2 SEND schools, which we are proposing. Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
I do. You've obviously talked about active travel for children that would be attending the schools. I don't feel that really addresses the large amount of staff that will be required for these for these schools. So could you say how all the staff will be travelling there? Because the only option at the moment, unless they live in Finchampstead, will be to drive, because there is no bus service, there is no train, there is no other way of getting there. Thank you.
I can't provide a train because it's not near the railway line. But if you read the report, you will see that there is the possibility of locating a bus stop on that road for the schools. And also, as part of the active travel plan, we will be encouraging staff to lift share and so on. there was a lot more that I could have said in that answer, but I'm only allowed to speak for 2 minutes in the answer, and there's more I could have said, and I'd be very happy to talk to you further about it after the meeting. In fact, I'll probably have a meeting with all the councillors for the area next week just to go through everything if you've got any concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question is from Charles Marget. Charles.
Thank you. Basically, my question was, in January of this year, planning permission was granted for 5 new houses on a site at 6 Johnson Drive in my ward. This site, which is in a rural area of Finch Hampstead, has been subject to multiple planning applications and appeals going back over 20 years. At the last appeal, the planning inspector described the application as unsustainable. How could the neighbourhood development plan for Finch Hampstead, which is being discussed later in this meeting, have helped stop this sort of application and any future applications which are like it?
Thank you. Lindsay.
Thank you, Charles, for your question. The short answer is no. Neighbourhood plans add an additional layer of planning policy to help reflect local circumstance and further guide the nature and quality of development in an area. They are therefore an opportunity to positively influence development based on the priorities on local communities rather than a mechanism to try to stop development. A neighbourhood plan cannot, for example, promote less development than identified in the adopted local plan for the locality covered by the plan. In the case of Finch Hampstead, the parish council and local volunteers have worked hard to prepare the Finch Hampstead neighbourhood development plan, which is now at an advanced stage. If recommendations in the executive item are accepted, the Finch Hampstead neighbourhood development plan will proceed to referendum in September 23, and if supported by the local community through that referendum, will therefore be adopted as part of the development plan. The Finch Hampstead neighbourhood development plan includes policies to influence development in the parish over the next 15 years. The plan includes policy on infill, small plot development and development of private residential gardens. This policy adds additional considerations and requirements for proposals like that granted at Johnson Drive, but does not try to prevent this type of development when located within the development limits. Of course, the Finch Hampstead neighbourhood development plan also includes other policies such as key local gap, green wedge, local green space policies, designations, and those relating to requirements for 10% biodiversity net gain. Once adopted, those policies will add to the quality of future development in the Finch Hampstead parish by providing an additional layer of planning policy that decision takers will consider when determining applications.
Thank you, Charles. Do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you. I know local volunteers, including Councillor David Cornish, have worked very hard on this plan for several years, and I commend them for their efforts. It has my full support. It's worth noting, in the case of 6 Johnson Drive, it's actually not included in the Finch Hampstead Neighbourhood Development Plan because it's in the countryside. But nevertheless, in this case, officers recommended approval of the application, despite being previously considered unsustainable by a planning inspector, because, to quote things I was told at the time, that there's no 5-year land supply, I believe it's now under 3, and there's no progress with the local plan. I think my question was this: in this background scenario and in this kind of climate, is it not the case that the protection that any neighbourhood development plan can offer against unsustainable development is sadly very limited?
Lindsay.
As the answer gave you, the protection is limited. But one thing that I think you could do to help the situation is to prod your government to respond on the NPPF proposals that were consulted on from December until March, and that we are able to have inclusion of the over provision of nearly 2,000 homes in this area. And as you know, the reason we don't have a 5-year land supply at the moment is because we have built too many houses too early, and that has eaten up all of the 5-year land supply that was there. So I would ask you to lobby your government to, as hard as you can, for them to put their proposals together. And I think that would be the greatest response and protection we could give And then regarding the local plan, we will be moving forward this year.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you. That I don't think we have any more member questions, so we will move on to agenda item 7, which is the corporate sponsorship policy. And Imogen, I think that's you.
Again, yes. This report allows the council to use a more proactive approach to generating income through sponsorship. As you know, the council's finances are tight at the moment. Inflation is squeezing us even tighter. We cannot increase our council tax receipts, so we have to look at new ways of paying for the services that our residents need. And this is one avenue of opportunity. This document sets out the framework of what kind of partnerships would be acceptable for corporate sponsorship and protects the council's reputation. It opens up Wokingham Borough Council for sponsorship in our parks, sporting venues, libraries, just to name a few things, and ensures that everyone in Wokingham Borough Council will have a consistent approach. So if anyone's got any ideas for corporate sponsorship, this is the framework that we will use. We just have to adopt the policy, agree to adopt the policy.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Imogen on this? I'm not seeing any. If anybody can come up with some corporate sponsorship, we will be grateful. It will be gratefully received, I think we would say. Thank you. Can we have a formal vote to accept the recommendation on page 27, please? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 8, which is the Finch Hampstead Neighbourhood Plan. I think, Lindsay, you're going to introduce this one.
Yes, I'm very pleased to see that this is coming through to executive tonight. As was just mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of work being done by the parish council and volunteers to get it to this stage. I just want to draw your attention to a number of items in the agenda.
This one, sorry, I forgot to say. The number of green spaces is wrong, inconsistent.
Oh, right. So, before I invite the executive,
Just start there. It says, sorry, this is my fault. I forgot to read out this bit before I introduce this item. There's a mistake in the report in that in one place it refers to 10 local green spaces and another place 8 local green spaces, and the correct figure is actually 9 local green spaces. So, yes.
Yes, because I would say it was 10 and 7 in the article.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. If you look at the what we got the recommendation tonight is to see whether we can accept the modifications that have been recommended by the independent examination, agree the Finch Hampstead Neighbourhood Plan modified in accordance with various things that the examiner asked to do to be included, agree to publish the decision statement and set out enclosure 2, authorises both the Director of Place and Growth and myself to agree the minor financial changes, and then to agree that this should go for referendum. If I look at page 51, you'll see a number of the key recommendations of the examiner, and it did include the deletion of a number of issues, which I'm aware had some issues, but I believe has now been accepted. There is also the full report, which is from page 57 onwards, and at page 71, the important part of that is that the examiner indicates that he is, quote, on the investment of my assessment, the plan in this section of our report, I am satisfied that it meets the basic conditions subject to the incorporation of the recommended mods contained in this report, which means that we've got approval to move to referendum from the examiner. So I just move this particular item. So if anybody has any issues.
Yep. Does anybody have any questions for Lindsay about this? No, I think we've got 5 recommendations on page 49, which is basically exactly as Lindsay has outlined, to move to the referendum stage for the plan in September.
Date of 7th of September has been indicated as the projected date.
Okay, excellent. Can I have all those in favour of the recommendations, please? Thank you. That is unanimous. Right, so we move on from there to the revenue monitoring report. which is on page 143. Imogen, I think.
I think that's me again, yes. This revenue monitoring report is very much a good news story about what happened last year. This showing the last quarter of the last year. So we inherited a budget from the previous administration with challenging levels of inflation and a number of unpredicted problems along the way, and we had to make changes and savings as we went. This shows that we have not only delivered the council services, but we have kept the council solvent and prepared it for the years to come. So to put this in perspective, we had a predicted shortfall overspend of 2.23 million in the revenue budget in Q1 last year, but with the help of our officers, some of those are behind me, we're able to turn it around and make in-year savings such that we had an £83,000 underspend. The report asks us to note the outturn position of the revenue budget, the levels of balance in respect to the general fund, and we have to agree the general fund carry forward request of 317,000 in Appendix B, and note the general fund balance of the 31st of March, which is 9.1 million, which is a reasonable level.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Imogen about that? I have an observation to make, which is it's the first year I can remember where there's been no supplementary estimates in year. So not only have we brought the budget in under, we didn't actually ask for any more money during the year either. So, yep, I think a good news story all round. So is everybody happy to vote for those recommendations on page 143 with the carry forwards and the noting the balances?
It's just noting and one agreement,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Can you indicate, please? Thank you. Again, that's unanimous. And we'll move on to the capital outturn. And you again, Millie.
Yes. This is the total of last year's work on capital spend, which is our projects that the council does. Some of the work is being carried forward to this year, which we need to approve, and due to financial pressures on the council, it's very limited on the capital projects that can be completed, and we must look at all of these spends more closely as we go forward. But we need to approve carry forwards, which is the additional projects which include the Rice Green Learning Disability Accommodation, which is funded by a contribution from the NHS Berkshire, additional funding for the Dinton Barn, which is used by the park management teams, and is funded from money that is ring-fenced for park maintenance, and additional funding from Reading Borough Council for the Winner Send School. We're also using some developer S106 contributions to fund some homeless accommodation, along with funding from the HRA. Overall, this report again is good news message, as many projects had to be rescheduled, removed or adjusted in some way, but we realise that we still need to complete some work for the benefit of our residents. We also need to stay solvent and support our residents. The work involved here is really a credit to the people, again, to the people sitting behind me. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Imogen about capital outturn? No, not seeing any. Okay, can we please vote for the recommendations on page 161? Those in favour? Thank you. Again, unanimous. And now something that's not Imogen. This one is for Sarah, the customer experience strategy.
Thank you. Really pleased to be bringing this here this evening. So this isn't the final version, and we hope to bring the final version of this for adoption in the autumn this year. But this is a draft of the customer experience strategy, and it's approval to go out for public consultation, which will run from the 3rd of July to the 17th of August. We know that there are pockets of excellence in the council in terms of customer experience, but we don't have consistency, and we know that for some residents they have had customer experiences that have been less than adequate. This is about ensuring that there is total council ownership across the whole organisation of that customer experience, and it doesn't just sit with customer services. I'd like to thank Jackie Whitney and her team for putting this together. Jackie is a phenomenal officer, and the work that's gone into this has been huge. And she's been out with her team talking to a number of groups of our residents to shape this. And what I really like about this strategy as well is just it is so easy to understand. We quite often as a council get lost in jargon and council speak, and the team has worked really hard to remove that. It's been really driven by what customers have been saying. And for all the exec members here, I'd say any strategies that have been developed in your areas, I would say to officers, look at the customer experience strategy as an example of what excellence looks like. So, I mean, everything's in the report there for you to have a look at, and but yeah, happy to take any questions you might have about it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Sarah about this?
Comment.
Yes, on page 180, and I think this is a very good move forward. I am very pleased that there's a section which talks about feedback, and that there were 4 areas where we need to make a difference, and that's feeling listened to, being able to get what they need, trusting in the council to spend money wisely, and feeling valued as a customer. I feel they're very important issues. I think we may have some more work to do to get there, but I think that's a very good focus, and I applaud it.
Thanks, Lindsay. I mean, this is what residents have told us is what's important to them. So this has come directly from them. And ultimately, this is a strategy about what we're trying to achieve. We know we're not there yet. We are in some places, but not everywhere. And this is what we're striving to. I just also wanted to pick up on one little thing. This has come, the draft strategy has come to our overview and scrutiny committee. And one of the questions raised was the term customer. Is that the right terminology to use? That is going to be tested with our residents as part of this consultation.
Okay, thank you. Am I right that this is the first time we've done a strategy like this?
Yes, this is the council's first customer excellence strategy.
Okay, right. And 3rd of July start?
Yeah, so next week we're going out to consultation. Assuming you're happy,
Yes,
yes, don't want to assume, and it will run until the 17th of August, and then we're going to have some time to really consider what's the feedback has been like before we come back in the autumn with a finalised version.
Thank you. So on page 179, we're being asked to approve it to go out to onward public consultation. Can I see all those in favour of that? Again, thank you. That's unanimous. Again, thank you. And then another thing that's been out to consultation and come back. So this is the Woking Borough Council tree strategy. Ian.
Yes, thank you. Members will not be unfamiliar with the tree strategy because it came before us in draft form to seek final public consultation. Not much has changed since then. The changes are minor, and it's a very thorough piece of work that's taken effectively 2 years to produce to get to this stage, and it will provide the platform, the unified platform for the whole of the borough's approach to tree management. And basically, tonight we're seeking approval to adopt that strategy.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ian? Sarah?
So it's just a comment. I've seen this be developed over a number of months, and the amount of time and effort that's gone into this, you know, not just council officers who have done a great job, but obviously external partners as well in the development of this. So I just wanted to pass on my thanks to everyone who's been involved in developing this.
Yeah, and I think we should thank all the residents and organisations who fed back during the consultation, because we had quite a few responses and they were generally very helpful, weren't they? Do you want to say, Lindsay, before we go back to Ian?
This is an area that will come into the local plan activities very, very strongly. This is linking the environmental aspects and will be very, very important. And I think there's some really detailed and very important work done here. And I think we'll be working a lot closer. The only specific issue I have, and I've raised before, is we need to be able to keep the trees that we plant alive. And I think that we've got a lot of action on how we're going to plant them, what type of trees to such like. And I would just like to make sure that when we've planted them, as many of them as possible survive.
Ian?
Yes. In particular, I think there's been too little regard paid to middle-aged trees, not quite veteran trees, not quite ancient trees, but those that will become the veterans and the ancient trees in due course. And a lot of those have been treated as disposable, and they shouldn't be. And yes, we can plant things, but it will take a long time for them to become substantial carbon sequestration machines. And we will plant a lot. And it's a very thorough piece of work. And I'd like to record my gratitude to the officers for the amount of work that's gone into this.
Thank you, Ian. Anybody else have any other comments? If not, we'll vote on the recommendations, which are on page 195. All those in favour? Thank you very much. I think that is duly adopted. Congratulations. The next item is mine, the development of Wokinham's 2 new special educational needs schools. Can I just draw your attention to start off with to the timetable on page 298, which shows why this report is being considered now. We had a bid for the school. We were successful in the bid that was announced in the spring. On the 9th of May, the Department for Education started the bidding process for the trusts who will be running the schools. And the 31st of August is the deadline for the expressions of interest for running the schools. And if you're going to run a school, you need to know where the school's going to be. However, it doesn't really make for a very sensible bid. So we do have to make the decision this evening so that we can get the best bids in for running the schools afterwards. I'd also ask you to note page 301. There's a couple of things which regularly come up when we discuss schools. One of them is how we're going to look at carbon reduction, and right at the bottom of that page it says the DfE builds all SEND schools to their output specification S21, which embeds net zero carbon in operation and climate resilience, which is a good thing. And immediately above that it says the DfE has confirmed that sprinklers are now fitted to all DfE SEND schools, so they will be included in the construction budget and funded by the DfE. For those of you who don't know, we have a policy in the council that we should have all new buildings by the council having sprinklers. It's great to see that we don't have to add anything to the specification this time, that the DfE has built them in, and that's as it should be. The report does include an analysis of the likely impact of having these 2 schools as additional local SEND provision in the borough, which is potentially substantial, not just for the high needs block funding, which is the funding that goes to pay for special educational needs, but also for our home to school transport budget, because children will not be having to travel out of the borough in anything like the numbers that they would if we didn't have these schools. They won't come on stream for several years, so it's not an immediate solution, but it is a long-term solution. Just couple more things to note. The schools will only occupy one corner of the Rooks Nest site. And if you look at page 315, there's a little map with the fields. There's 4 fields marked out, and where the schools are going is field 1, which is less than a quarter of the site. The use for the rest of it is not absolutely finally determined, but we are looking at woodland extensions or solar farm extensions or allotment or farmland is the sort of thing we're looking at. That's itemised in the report under the Rooks Nest thing. Everything, yeah. I'm going to ask Lindsay to come in, because the other part of this is that recommendation 7 takes the whole of Rooks Nest out of the local plan update. And I wonder whether Lindsay would like to say something about that.
Yes, I think the best thing to do is to read out recommendation 7.
Yep.
And that is that we agree, if on the recommendation, we're to agree that the whole of Rooks Nest Farm site, which has previously been promoted in the local plan update for residential use with an estimated residential land value of 19 million, will now not be used for residential use, with the residential land value estimation to be foregone, and that the previous promotion of the site for residential development will be withdrawn from the local plan update process. This means that the whole of the Rooks Nest Farm is now protected from residential development. And as Prue has just mentioned, we have got proposals. The site already has got approval to include the COVID memorial wood, which we approved earlier this year. And there are additional other aspects that we're looking at, which includes increased woodland. There's a site being proposed for allotments, and of course there's one corner where there's the solar farm. So this area, which will be now protected from being used as a residential area for the future.
And just before, I think Imogen has got something she would like to ask. All the options that we considered for these schools is laid out in the report, starting in Appendix D. So you can see all the reasons for and against each site and why we've come to the conclusion that Rook's Nest is the best. Right, Imogen and then Sarah.
It's really just to point out the fact that with SEND schools, each location only has 100 pupils, whereas a standard primary school is 240 pupils. And obviously, I know people are concerned about the amount of traffic on the roads. Actually, these two schools really amount to less than one ordinary primary school. So, and I think that's something worth pointing out.
Thank you. And Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the carbon points that you made, and actually in response to the member's question earlier as well. About having them both on site, and we too often talk about operational carbon and not enough about embedded carbon. So the cost of actually constructing things in the first place, I'm really pleased that that's been a consideration in the citing of this, and something I hope that we look at going forward for other schemes. The other thing I wanted to say, it's great that the Department for Education, do this for SEND schools. What I would ask is that this is standard for all schools, and it shouldn't be an additional add-on nice to have. This should be business as usual, and actually if they make that commitment, it would actually bring the cost of doing it down. So that I don't know if there's any way that we can actually feedback as an authority and make that request.
No.
So
I expect we can at some point. There's also another possibility by putting them at Rook's Nest, because it will be next to the solar farm, and there may be a possibility of having a connection. I don't know whether that's feasible.
Technically, it's not quite as simple as that, but we can talk about that offline.
Yes, no, that's fine. But
Small win.
but
We still have to connect it to the grid.
Yes, yeah, we do have to connect into the grid, and that's a whole other issue. Is there anybody who wants to ask anything else about these? No. Okay. We've got 7 recommendations. Then can I ask you to? They're on page 295 to page 296. Can I ask for agreement with those recommendations, please? Thank you very much. Again, unanimous. Now, St Crispin's Leisure Centre consultation. Ian, that's you.
Yes, there is a distinct decline in the usage of St Crispin's leisure centre since the return to activities after COVID, after the main thrust of COVID, and it really is. It's reached the point where it's necessary to consider whether there are other options that we need to look at for the future of that leisure centre. One of the contributory factors is, of course, the opening of Carnival Hub, which has taken some of the users away from St Crispin's. And so what we're seeking tonight is approval to start an 8-week consultation for interested groups. The school, St Crispin's School and West End School will be consulted. The significant user groups of the centre itself will be consulted, and it will be an open to public comment in the neighbouring wards. There will be drop-in sessions, and there will be one-to-one meetings with the significant user groups, and because of the time scale, we would like to start the consultation effectively immediately so that we can catch people in term time as well as in the school holidays. We get two classes of usership caught with the one consultation.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask Ian about this? Do you have any idea when it will come back? I think it says in here that we have the consultation, it will come back fairly shortly afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Anybody want to say anything else? Otherwise, we're being asked to approve the consultation period. And all those in favour show, please. Thank you. Again, unanimous. Thank you. Right. Then we go as Ian again. I think the procurement strategy for the purchase and distribution of wheeled bins in the borough. Just make it clear to everybody who's listening, this is not about whether we buy wheeled bins. That decision has been made. This is about how we procure the contract, how we buy them. Ian.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. It is only a question tonight of the procurement method that will be used for the wheeled bins for the residual waste stream. It has been looked at by the procurement board, and they have a strong recommendation that the method should be to go out to open tender rather than to use a framework supplier or that on those sort of approaches. One of the reasons, obviously, is that at the moment there's a lull in not many councils are ordering wheel bins right now. They could well be in the not too distant future when the government decides how many waste streams it wants councils to collect from the curbside, as they are sitting on their hands on that, as they are on numerous other subjects. But they have trailed the fact that they want a number of different waste streams collected. But that is for the future. We are now talking tonight just about wheel bins for the residual waste stream, that is the non-recyclables which currently go into our blue plastic bags.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ian about this? It seems relatively straightforward that if we need bins, then the best way to buy them is by an open tender process.
Tender.
Yes. Okay. Nobody's got anything. Can we have a vote on that, please? To accept that recommendation, which is on page 333. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Item 16, which is on page 343. Now, we are now moving into items which have Part 2 items. For those members of the public who are watching this online or not familiar with council things, that is where there is information which has to be kept confidential, hard to say that word, to the council because, for example, it contains financial information which would disadvantage us if it were to get out. So if you're doing a tendering process, you don't really want people to know how much you're going to set the contract for in advance, those kind of things. So I don't know whether anybody will want to go into Part 2. If you do have a question that relates to Part 2, then you need to signal it so that we can make sure that we turn off all the live streaming and so on and can exclude members of the public. Before we start, you will have noticed that in this agenda item, the current contract expires at the end of July. And it's quite a short period to try and let a contract starting now by the 1st of August. However, officers are totally within their rights and have done to do what. Sorry, that's not a very sensible sentence. The officers are totally within their rights to do what they have done, which is to extend the existing contract for a period of time by negotiation. There's a 213,000 threshold, which they can't exceed on that. They're not exceeding it. So the contract will continue by negotiation until the point at which the new contract is put in place. So I don't know whether anybody has anything they want to say about it. Imogen, did you want to say something about it? It's a financial matter. It's down in Clive's name as the Business and Economic Development. We're not entirely sure why we think it's left over from leader of the council before. I'm
not sure either, but I think Clive might have been dealing with it in its past format, so that's possibly why his name is on there. I feel that it's something we have to do, and as long as the gap between the contract being selected and the process is sorted, it is covered, and I understand that it's going to happen.
Yeah. We have two recommendations on page 343. Does anybody want to say anything else before we move to them? Yes, Lindsay.
To clarify it, I think our recommendations needs a slight modification to take into account the fact that we're doing it with that point about there being an extension to the current contract period.
Let me just consult whether we do. Do you think we do? No. I'm getting advice from the Director of Resources and Assets that we don't need to do that. It's not required. Because the officers have delegated authority to do that kind of thing already. So we don't need to give them permission to do that. They will do it.
Executive decision.
It's not an executive decision. Right, yes. I might have, I mean, yeah, we are where we are. It might have been better had this report come earlier and they'd had more time to do it before they needed to do that, but they are acting entirely legitimately. Okay, so two recommendations on page 343. Does anybody want to say anything else? Or we move to the vote? Those in favour? Thank you. All right, that is approved unanimously. Item 17, which is on page 357. Again, we're into an item which has a part 2 section on it. Can people please indicate to me if they think they want to say anything that's in part 2? This would normally be Stephen to deal with, or possibly David, because it involves a care home. Neither of them are present, so I need to deal with it in their absence. This is basically an item because we can no longer afford to do the care home in the way that was envisaged. So all the planning permission has been granted for all of this, but the care home is now coming out as more expensive, and there's a number of other things to do with how much risk we want to have on how we do the housing, and how firm we want the income to the council to be. We're trying to juggle three things here to get as close to net carbon zero as we can, to provide as much social housing as we can out of the quantum of housing that there is, and to make some money for the council. And that has to be seen in the picture of how much risk we want to take on top. So it's a juggling act. We have got a number of different recommendations. The first one is to stop progressing the care home, but not altogether, for a review of how else we might manage to deliver those spaces. We still need those care home spaces. To go ahead with the residential side, which has got the planning permission, but the exact method by which that residential will be delivered is to be further looked at. Exact delivery method is delegated to Graham behind me and Stephen to determine. I'm sure they will consult with the rest of the executive before they make any final decisions. Does anybody have anything they want to say? Yes, right. I'll start with Sarah, then Rachel, and then Lindsay. Sarah.
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on the net zero aspect of this, as I'm sure you'd expect me to. Yes. Just so the executive are aware, yesterday the Climate Change Committee annual report came out, and buildings is one of the worst performing areas in terms of carbon reduction out of the whole government plan. So this is going to need to be a big area of focus. Obviously, it costs more for residents to operate non-net zero houses because they've got more energy being leaked. So having net zero houses as close to as possible is, while there is at the moment a small increase in the capital cost, the lifetime cost is much cheaper. But actually that cost is coming down and down all the time. And the more this is normalised, that increased capital cost flattens out. So I do hope that by the time that this is done, we're in a position where it's cost advantageous to do this. I should also add that properties that don't need to be retrofitted can command a higher retail value as well, so that needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay. I'm sure Graham was listening to that, and I'm sure we can make sure Stephen hears it as well. Rachel.
Thank you. So this.
Drag it towards you. That's better.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic. This site has got an exit out onto the busy Twyford Road, and vehicles often come very fast down the hill towards Wokingham. And visibility is limited because the exit is quite close to the brow of the hill. Residents are understandably quite worried about this. Are you able to confirm that all reasonable steps will be taken to make the exit safe?
Yes, I can. I'm sure. I don't know whether Paul wants to make a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to come back on that. This was an outline planning application, so the details need to be approved and meet highway design standards for that junction. So there's still work to be done.
So yes, I think is the answer to your question.
Super, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Lindsay.
Yes, I'd like to go beyond the point that Sarah raised.
You're not going into part two?
I will avoid
Right,
going into
excellent.
part two.
Well done.
But you know I've raised a point on that
Yes.
internally. I'll raise the issue with the local plan, because within the local plan, we have been working on the climate change activities, and there are, as Sarah mentioned, the issue with buildings. It looks like the way that the government are leaning is that they will be using building control arrangements to update the requirements for any properties. There was an update in 2022, and there is one now projected for 2025. And therefore, any buildings and any houses that are built after the date of the 2025 building control update would need to adhere to the new changes. So when you're looking at this site, one needs to be cognizant that you can't build all the houses at a particular type of housing without that. And I should also add that carbon net zero is one of our desires and requirements that will be within the local plan. So again, there will be a date within that any properties that are built, so anything that doesn't take account of that is not sufficient.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I think again, Graham will be listening, and we will make sure that Stephen has that put in front of him before any decisions are made. I'm sure there's work to do on deciding which option is the best option still. This is not a final ever report. So we're on page 357, where the recommendations are. Can I ask for all of those in favour of those recommendations? Thank you. That's again approved unanimously. We're nearly at the end. We're coming to another one with a part two. Again, I'm hoping we won't need to go into part two for this one. The corporate building cleaning service on page 385. Imogen, this one is you.
Yes, it is. It should be a simple one as well. This is to set up a new contract for our cleaning services for all of our buildings and schools that the council own and manage. And I understand that it can be variable depending on usage, because obviously this building, we've stopped using the top 2 floors, so we obviously had to vary the cleaning contract, and I understand it would be variable, but this would run from April 2024, and it's basically we just have to agree to procure a new contract for cleaning services via the competitive procurement process, as it says.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, are there any questions for Imogen? This is relatively straightforward, I think. I'm not seeing anybody. Can we have a vote then on the recommendations on page, sorry, I've lost the page, 385. Thank you very much. That's unanimous again. Now, we come to item 19. This one is entirely in part 2. It's called Local Sufficiency for Children in Care. I do want to reassure people that this is not in part 2 because there's some sort of emergency or crisis in the local sufficiency for children in care. It's because we're trying to do a service improvement and it contains some sensitive information which we can't divulge to the public. So there's no need to panic. So we will need to move into private session. So I'd like to propose the following motion, that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of Appendix 2 on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person. Do I have the agreement of members that we go into part 2? Thank you. In that case, I'll have to ask all of you who are not members of the council or officers of the council to leave. And then we have to turn off the live streaming.